Is France ungovernable? How many prime ministers have they had? Is it 7, 8, 9, 10? I lose count. What is going on? Is the economy collapsing? Will Macron resign? We now have the pleasure of being joined by Charles-Henri Gallois. Now, Charles-Henri is an economic advisor to Jordan Bardella, who is president of National Rally. Charles-Henri is his advisor in the European Parliament. Hello there, Charles-Henri. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. Obviously, we want to know what on earth is going on in France. Some people say this could be the end of the Fifth Republic. France is essentially ungovernable. Are things that bad?
I won't say it would be the end of the Fifth Republic. I mean, it's more the end of Macron era. It was almost the end of Macron era last year during the general election. What happened is that they have done a quite dishonorable alliance between hard left and Macron to keep power. They are trying to govern, but they have not the majority in the parliament. And now we are a bit stuck because you cannot have a budget that can satisfy both the left and the right.
How much of this, therefore, is Macron's own fault? Because he clearly called that snap election, created this coalition, including the hard left, to block out National Rally. And now, essentially, he's harvesting what he has sown. But my understanding is Rassemblement are refusing to come to the table to have any negotiations.
We were trying to get stability, and we always came to the table to speak to the prime minister, even if we would not have participated to a government because it's not clearly our line. But now you have maybe seen what happened. It's a 14 hours government. I mean, we said we have to stop this sketch, and we have to go back to election. Anyways, there is no solution. They have no solution because they have last almost 1 month to get exactly the same government. It's ridiculous. So the only way is to go back to people so that they can choose new deputies and have a broad majority and have stability. I mean, there is no other way. Maybe they are still trying to gain some time, but I don't think it will work eventually. And I mean, they will be even more ridiculous, but maybe it will be what will happen. We will see.
Well, and what about the possibility of President Macron resigning himself? I mean, some people, of course, have said that's the solution. What do you think to that one?
The former prime minister, actually the first prime minister of Emmanuel Macron, has called for Emmanuel Macron to resign within 3 months after the budget is passed to get a new presidential election. I mean, normally it's a solution in the Fifth Republic, whether you dissolve the National Assembly or you resign. Actually, it's what de Gaulle did when he lost a referendum in 1969. But de Gaulle is de Gaulle, and Macron is not de Gaulle at all. And I don't see him resigning because you can see him when he attends to international summit. It's what he likes to get the light. A bit of narcissism from Macron, and I don't see him at all resigning. So that's why we ask him to dissolve National Assembly, because I don't expect him to resign, unfortunately.
How dangerous is this for the French economy? Because a while ago, there was speculation, certainly in the press in the United Kingdom, that France would have to potentially go to the IMF for a bailout, such as the situation with debt. Surely this instability is having a huge impact. Is this going to be a big problem for the French economy?
No, I mean, the French economy is in a bad shape, but you don't have to, we don't have to be that dramatic in a way that France has no issue at all to borrow money. It's becoming more expensive, but each time France issue a bond, you have more than twice people asking for it. So you don't have any liquidity issue that will require to go to the IMF. And anyway, the IMF intervene normally only when you ask for it. So I don't think you will have IMF. And anyway, France borrow each year like 300 billion euro per year. the IMF cannot do it, cannot do that. We are not Greece. They don't have this kind of level to help a country that like France, which is systemic. So I mean, the situation is bad. The issue we have is uh, almost every 4 5 months we got 100 billion more debt because the management is economic management from Macron people is a disaster. So the more we wait, the more the situation will be difficult for the next prime minister or for the next president. That's why we call for a quick snap election and to do what is needed to be done regarding the public finance in France.
And what about political polarization in France? I mean, like everywhere, there's more and more polarization. I'm looking forward to the presidential elections, for example. Could we see Mr. Bardella against Monsieur Mélenchon? That would be great fun for an outsider like me. But you could say this is the result of polarization. Is that fair?
Polarization or the bad management that have been done from the center and from Macron. I mean, it's a possibility when you look at the polls. I mean, sometimes they are talking about three blocks in France, but actually you have a National Rally which is almost the size of the two united against us. So it's more National Rally against the other one. But Macron bloc now is so low that let's say the most likely scenario would be to be against the left. Then would it be center left or would it be hard left with Jean-Luc Mélenchon? It's a policy. It's a possibility. I mean, politically, it will be more interesting to be against Jean-Luc Mélenchon because you will have two very different projects. And I think I know the projects the French people will vote for.
What about tension in society? Because last summer the UK saw significant amounts of rioting. France is not unfamiliar with social unrest. There are huge protests there against all sorts of things, including the rates of immigration. If there isn't a snap election, if Macron continues to try and hold on, continues to try and fudge it, continues to keep driving the car over the cliff, will the people of France take to the streets?
You remember maybe what happened with the yellow vest back in 2018, but now the situation, I mean, is quite different. People are quite exhausted. There are also more difficulties regarding purchasing power, so it's even more difficult, let's say, to have a revolution or something like this. Let's say when you have a purchasing power issue. So it seems that the French people, they are quite disgusted, but they are more waiting for Macron era to be done.
And how does this work in tangent with the lawfare against Marine Le Pen? Because we're talking here about the parliamentary election, not the presidential election. But how destabilising has that been to Rassemblement?
Will depend a lot on the appeal. If it's still the same, it will be really a disgrace, and there is nothing in the case that normally would allow her to be condemned, or even more, not to have the possibility to run for presidential election. But if it's the case, and if the justice try to prevent Marine Le Pen to get to power, Jordan Bardella will be the candidate.
Okay, final question, then we'll let you go. Charles-Henri, is National Rally happy in the European Union? If you take power, what does this mean for Brussels?
We have some discrepancies with the EU, that's true. The main part is about, of course, immigration. We'll have some discussion with them regarding French contribution to the EU, which is at net more than 10 billion that we cannot accept.
Okay, that's wonderful. Charles-Henri, we know you've got a busy agenda ahead of you today, so we can let you go.
Thank you. Have a good day.
So, what do you reckon, Alex? Are they going to stumble on for a few more months, or is this the end of the Fifth Republic? Oh, our friend Charles-Henri said no. What do you reckon?
Well, if there's one thing we know about the left in the West is they're extremely determined. They will not cede any ground. They do everything they can to cling on to power, even in the face of adversity. I mean, you just have to look at the fact that Joe Biden was basically a carcass in America. They kept wheeling him out, pretending he was president. And I think Macron is almost similar to Biden himself, but rather than being ailing in bad health physically, his governance is falling apart. And frankly, you could argue that he made this himself. When we had the snap election in the UK, there was a snap election in France called all of a sudden because Macron thought, well, heck, we're going to start losing a lot of seats. If I call this election now, we will unsure foot the opposition. He created this grand coalition siding with some extreme left parties. So they had an everyone but Rassemblement vote. And essentially what this has created is a government in France that doesn't get along. They're not natural bedfellows. They can't make decisions. They can't get things through Parliament, all because Macron fudged something, anything, this grand, disastrous coalition simply to keep Marine Le Pen away from power. Well, it seems to me the chickens have come home to roost.
Well, you know what, for lovers of France like moi and lovers of history like moi, this looks a bit like the end of the Fourth Republic to me, doesn't it? I mean, back then, all governments would fall until they had to change the system, which is why they brought in the Fifth Republic to make it a bit more stable. It seems to me like that's where we are, in fact. It doesn't work anymore, but I seem to be the only one with this opinion. And what about the economy? I mean, it seems the French economy is suffering, but it's not the only one, is it? I mean, the UK economy seems to be up against the ropes as well. In fact, the whole of Europe is not exactly doing great.
Arguably most of the world, actually. If you look at debt to GDP ratios, France is certainly not the sickest when it comes to nations in the G7. But there has been talk of things could collapse. I don't think they were listening to Charles-Henri, who is an economist. He doesn't think that's possible. He thinks France are going to be absolutely fine. But what I thought was really interesting was him basically saying, unlike the normal taste for demonstrations, the French are just fed up. They're exhausted. They don't want to take to the streets. They want some sort of security. They want stability. And so if Macron has sort of, licked his finger, put it up to the wind and decided that that is where the temperament of France is at, I think he's just going to try and put sticking plaster once again over a gaping wound and struggle on. Certainly with his own presidency, I don't think he's going to resign anytime soon. The big question, of course, is whether there will be a plebiscite. I don't think he wants it, but I think he's now essentially in checkmate. If he can't find another prime minister, if he can't operate a workable coalition, then it has to go back to the ballot box.
Checkmate. How do you say that in French? Checkmate. There you go. La fin des haricots. The end of the beans. It's all up. I have to throw in a few bits of French there. Okay. And what does this mean for Europe? Because Monsieur Macron, the president, has been, to a certain extent, the de facto leader of Europe, hasn't he? I mean, this does have consequences.
Well, he's the self-professed leader of Europe, the little mini president, but I don't really think that is his status. He's very good at showboating, but we all know that the European Commission pulls all the strings. But what's interesting, actually, is speaking to Charles-Henri there, who at one point actually led the Frexit movement in France. He was part of a young person's movement, a sort of small political party, which was campaigning to leave the EU. It's interesting to hear that that is no longer on the table, perhaps because at the moment France wants a sense of stability. It does want to, as Charles-Henri said, take back control of certain issues. The same sort of demands, actually, that David Cameron put to the EU before we had our referendum to leave, which is we want better border control. We want something in terms of a rebate. We want to manage our own energy pricing because we're paying way too much and it's crippling our industry. Those big issues are things that are sort of heavily entrenched in the European treaties. I cannot see there being any concessions coming from Brussels. So as things move forward and as this plays out, if we end up with a Rassemblement-led government in France, if we then end up with either Marine Le Pen or Jordan Bardella as the next Président de la République, then it'd be interesting to see how that debate moves forward. We actually now have a growing coalition of leaders inside the EU who are very sceptical about the EU, from Italy to Hungary. France would be a big beast to add to that growing chorus of countries who are member states of the European Union who say this isn't working. Will France ever have a vote to leave? It's very difficult. They've got the euro. It means they're far more tied in to the project than the UK ever was. But you can tell that there is a growing sense of Euroscepticism, and I think that this would make a huge material difference, which is also why Macron is so desperate to cling to power. The globalist socialists do not want their project to fail.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, actually, because unlike the UK, France is in the euro. And I do remember how many years ago there was talk about Brexit, wasn't there? And what actually happened was people, older people in particular, got frightened that their pensions, which were denominated in euros, might lose a load of value. If France left the euro, it was going to be chaotic. The euro is the real glue, I think, to the European Union. If it wasn't for the euro, you can leave, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is why they devised the single currency and put the cart before the horse by not having common fiscal policy, because you cannot have a cooperation of nation states who have their own chancellors of the exchequer, who set their own budgets, but then all share the same currency and interest rates. The architects of the euro must have known that, and they put the cart before the horse by rolling out the single currency in the hope that everything else would follow in the downdraft. And that hasn't really happened, which is why the project is so fundamentally flawed. But it is, like you said, the quicksand that sucks countries in. Extremely difficult to leave a political project and to leave a currency. Of course, the negotiation, if someone did want to leave the EU, who was part of the Eurozone, would be, well, can we leave and carry on using the single currency? But you can imagine what Brussels' answer to that question would be.
Yeah, it would be, yes, you can, but you have to do what we say. Basically, it's like being in, but without the negotiating power. Okay. Do you want to talk about Brigitte Macron, Alex, or not?
I know the story, but I don't know much about the story. We may as well talk about it because it's fascinating. It'd be a shame to
go on then. But the situation, I understand it, is there are court cases going on, right? There's a court case going on in the US and Brigitte, this is obviously over allegations that she might have been born a man. I mean, I really don't understand the obsession over this story, but evidently there's a court case going on. If there's a court case, might she have to take the stand?
This is really interesting. This is all coming from the American commentator influencer Candace Owens, who for a long time, she's made a documentary online, has been arguing that Brigitte Macron is in fact her brother, not Candace Owens' brother, but Macron's wife, was born male and has had a sex change. And it's something, of course, that the First Lady of France absolutely refutes. And if it isn't true, it is disgusting. It is horrifying to do that to a woman. It doesn't matter her position. It doesn't matter her influence. It's a disgusting, vile allegation to make. But there are people in America who are convinced that Candace Owens is onto something and that she's played a very clever game here, drawing them in, making them say publicly, no, this is absolutely untrue. We're not going to have to give out this evidence. We're not going to have to do that. Then the American legal system wades in and says, right, if you want to shut this down, it's very simple. If you want to make this story go away, just provide the evidence. So this is where we're at right now. It'll be interesting to see how the Macrons respond to this, because this isn't just some sort of small side story bubbling away. Candace Owens has a huge amount of influence. And so the big question is, if it isn't true, why not just prove that it's not true? You could shut it down in a moment. Candace Owens would be made to look terrible. You could counter-sue, no doubt, for psychological and reputational damage. So the big question is, why not?
Let's leave it there. That's great. Alex, thanks a lot. Thanks for watching Interference. I don't need to do a hand jive because we've got a graphic.